Welcome to the Grand Prix 24/7 podcast, your weekly insight into the world of Formula One. Hello and welcome to the Grand Prix 24/7 podcast. I'm your host Will, and today I'm joined by the author of In the Pit Lane, Gary Sloan, to discuss some of the key storylines going into the 2021 Formula One season. Gary, how are you doing?
Very well, thanks, Will. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm not too bad, thank you. Feels like it's been an excessively long off season, even though we're barely halfway through it. But I think with everything else that's going on in the world at the moment, I just can't wait to have some Formula One back in my life. So today we're going to discuss some of the storylines going into the new season. I know the Lewis Hamilton contract negotiations is something that a lot of people have been talking about, but I think given that it's been months of speculation now, we're probably going to steer clear of that and discuss some of the other interesting things that I'm sure people want to hear us talk about. So the first one, I think, Gary, is the move of Sebastian Vettel. We saw him at the Aston Martin factory over the weekend, sporting a new hairdo, and that definitely caused some interest. But I think this move is one that a lot of people are very interested in, and I'm interested to get your take on the move itself, the decision to go with Vettel, and kind of what his chances of succeeding in 2021 are.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. It's what F1 needs. I'm not so sure it was a new hairdo, it was more lack of hair. I think the move on his part, I mean, without rehashing the old Ferrari thing, I think that was a part that was due to happen. Brave move on Vettel's part. I think that this is literally make or break for him. He has his doubters, but you have to argue, four-time world champion. He's not lost it. The team are gelling well. They gelled very well with Sergio Perez. So it might take them a while to adjust to Vettel and Vettel to adjust them. And then, of course, he's got the whole Lance Stroll conundrum. He's got to beat Lance, and on the same side of the coin, Lance has got to beat him for their own individual agendas. But I think, I'm hopeful. I would hate to see Vettel get in the Aston Martin and be trailing and losing and, going through the same torture, even just for him as an individual, let alone the fans. I don't think we could sit back and watch another sorry tale.
Yeah, I have a feeling that Vettel is going to bounce back this season. I think that the Aston Martin kind of Mercedes-based philosophy might suit him a little bit better than what they had at Ferrari over the last year. And I definitely think the motivation was a big issue for him last year. If you look back to 2019, he wasn't as far off Charles Leclerc as some perhaps have made out. He still had pole positions, he had a race win. So I definitely don't think that he's by any means done. And I just think that change of scenery to work within this kind of new exciting project, I think that will kind of revitalize him a little bit. In terms of Aston Martin themselves, Gary, they've signed this new deal with Cognizant. We're kind of seeing this team come together and perhaps a little sign of what they're going to look like in Formula One going forward. How hopeful are you for the team in general that they're going to get things right?
Very hopeful. I think Stroll's putting all the right bits of the jigsaw together. He's a man that can galvanise individuals. He's getting the financial side to it right. He's bringing in the key people. They're a bit behind in the new factory, but that's just because of COVID. Yeah, and I think they're very, very, very ambitious. Stroll Senior's in it to win. That's in his DNA. You don't become a billionaire without having that streak in you. So I'm very hopeful for the team. I think that I don't think they'll suffer from any of the internal politics that some of the other teams are still faced with, and they've got a more stable environment. So, and I agree with you. I think Vettel will flourish. There's nothing more to motivate you and prove your doubters wrong.
Well, I think two teams that will be involved in that battle for third place alongside Aston Martin are Alpine and McLaren. Let's touch on them one by one. With McLaren, we have to switch over to Mercedes engines. I think that they're potentially one of the cars that will see the most change on due to the fact that they're going to have to disrupt their aero packaging slightly in order to fit in that new power unit. Do you think that this is more of a case of another kind of marginal step on the way back to the front of the grid for McLaren. You don't see a huge jump towards the front, do you?
I don't know. I think that it's another consolidation year for them. I think they need to bed down Ricciardo into the team. I agree with you on the Mercedes engines. Great step forward to them, but it won't be without its issues in terms of development. I mean, you can never write McLaren off. They've got great strength of depth in that team, but I don't think they'll be making the same leaps forward as they may think they will. I still think they'll be in the chase for the coveted third spot that Paul hates, but I don't expect. I think, as I say, I think it's a consolidation year for them. I think their eyes are on next year.
Yeah, I think that we have to remember that they were really floundering just a couple of years ago. And while it's very impressive that they've made this leap up to third in the championship last year, you got to remember that basically every new position you take up in the championship is that bit harder than the last one. So going from third to second or first is a real big challenge. But Alpine, I guess the big news is the departure of Cyril Abiteboul and the arrival of Fernando Alonso. What do you make of those two big moves that they have made?
Yeah. Well, the Cyril one's a conundrum. I've tried very hard to find somebody that'll spill the beans. So far, nobody's spilling the beans as to what was behind that. The most outrageous story I heard was that our old friend William Story and Rich Energy was coming on board, and Cyril couldn't stand the thought of that. But I discounted that one as pure speculation. I don't know what happened there. It's a strange one. I'm not quite sure what's going on with the whole Alpine project, and the change at the top and the switch to the performance brand, which, really revolves around one car, although I think they're going to expand that over the season. It's a strange one. I think that there's a lot going on in that team that we're not hearing about. Fernando, just box office for Formula One, him coming back. Big Fernando fan. I think he'll be in the chase. The $64 million question is, will his temperament get the better of him, or has he matured that he can be a team player? Will he destroy Ocon? Will Ocon, out-qualify him? And, Fernando won't react well to that. And I don't know, behind the scenes, Flavio's never far away from Fernando. You don't know what's went on there in terms of Cyril. They're keeping it close to their chest. But box office gold. I can't wait to see Fernando behind the wheel of a car again.
Yeah, and from his other excursions within racing, I think there's little evidence suggest that his skills have diminished any. So I agree completely. On the Cyril thing, I must point out, I did think that over the last 2 years, some of the progress Renault have made has been impressive, and I think he definitely deserves some credit for that. But as you say, it really is a difficult one to kind of wrap your head around, and I'm not sure exactly why that decision was made. Let's move on to Ferrari. Another team, unfortunately, from their point of view at least, who could be in the battle for third. There is some chatter that they've made some progress on the engine side, and there's been a lot of development. Do you think they're going to make a jump?
It's hard to say, Will. It's really hard to say. I've heard the chatter as well that, they're making progress, and we don't know how much of last year was because of the previous year, the illegal quote-unquote engine, and it left them in a tailspin. The one thing I do know is that F1 needs Ferrari to come back, and we can't be seeing them heading towards the back end of the grid. It's not good for the sport. It's not good for the fans. We need that. We need them to be in the mix, whether they're able to or not. It's such a volatile team on the whole, lots of levels, from the top down. Still question marks over, whether Binotto will keep his job. And, I think what they've got to do is come out fighting strong from race one. I think if they have a couple of bad races at the start, then that could be the downward spiral. So whether they've got the performance under their belt will remain to be seen.
I definitely think that they made some progress last season. Although, strangely enough, their best results actually did come at the start in terms of Charles Leclerc picking up a couple of podiums. But we kind of saw that they kind of really bottom out around Monza and Mugello.
Yeah.
And there was definitely a progression. So I expect to see that, but I don't think it's going to be a dramatic leap back to them becoming race win contenders. I think it's going to be similar to McLaren, a process of kind of marginal improvement.
Yeah.
And, everyone is going to have their eye on 2022. How much of an impact do you think that's going to have on development and on just the route that teams take towards improvement and how much focus they put on next year?
Massive, massive. I mean, I think it's maybe going to be one of the downsides to the season that, there won't be teams making big leaps forward, and it undoubtedly is going to be a Mercedes up front. I mean, we're only hope is Red Bull chasing them. But I think all the teams, it's going to be a difficult year for them financially. I mean, some of them are already making noises that they're not too fussed about this upcoming season. They'll just go racing. But the eye's certainly on next season. And I think the sport will be poorer for that, because we do need them to be trying to develop to make the league. So we might get, when we're a third of the way through the season, a very settled picture. And that's not good. That's not good for the fans. That's not good for racing. But you can't blame the teams. Their hands are really tied as to what they can do. And if they need to switch the focus, because most of their longer term 5-year plans do involve, the 2023 season onwards. So if they can write 2021 off and get ready for 2022, that's what they'll do.
It does remind me a little bit of the situation that we had with Red Bull in 2013. And, come second half of that season, when everyone had their little eye on 2014, that became obviously a procession for Sebastian Vettel. So, yeah, I agree with you. I hope that while it's an inevitable fact that there will be some focus on 2022, I do hope that we don't end up in a situation where, Mercedes is taking, 10 or 11 races in a row, because, while that was obviously the case at times last season, we did have a couple of unexpected results, and you got to hope that we get a couple of these strange situations, with rain, with safety cars, just to mix things up a little bit, because that is important. So obviously your kind of area of expertise is the kind of financial and sponsorship side of things. So let's move on to a couple of questions in that field. Obviously, COVID-19 continues to take hold. What, in your view, kind of how have the teams managed this situation? This is now a second season where this is kind of the reality of the situation that we're living in. And, there is some hope that hopefully with the vaccine being rolled out increasingly wide scale worldwide, that maybe we'll get a bit back to normal. But I don't think anyone's expecting a full return to normality by the end of the year. How are the teams coping?
They're doing good. They're doing good. Formula One overall is doing good. I mean, they're one of the industries that have reacted. I mean, I've been a critic of Liberty Media on many fronts, but I've praised them enormously for their efforts during COVID. They got they did something that nobody thought was possible, which was, have an international circus basically in a time of COVID. The financial implications continue, but I mean, all analysts and all financial backers looking for certainty, and COVID's far from it, but they can look forward from that. It's the short-term problem. So what we've seen is Liberty's shored up their balance sheet with adding on more debt last year, and they seem to be making noises that, they'll be okay for this year. The teams are more realistic now. They've got a better idea. There'll be less revenue coming into F1 because there's still elements due to COVID. I think they'll be planning for the worst and hoping for the best. And if you plan for the worst, you don't run out of cash, which was the problem last year. Some of the teams sailed very close to the wind. So I think the money men will be planning for the worst. So within the sport, if the fans aren't going to the circuits, then Liberty have to support the circuits that can't finance the races and take less hosting fees off the ones that can. The money they make off hospitality's dropped. We still don't know. The TV deals went through, but you can imagine there will be certain clauses that will have put less money in the pot. Same with the sponsors. I mean, they've been very good, the teams and the sponsors, the teams and Formula One. Sponsors haven't walked. What's gone on in terms of renegotiations, another thing. But the teams with the budget sees all good and well having a budget cap, but Formula One still needs to earn the money to pay the teams to pay for that. That's the budget cap's what they spend, but they still need to look at the revenue. But we've seen, Williams, McLaren, Haas, they've all taken the steps that's needed to secure the financial part. And then you've got, Mercedes have committed, They brought on Ineos as a shareholder. So they've all taken the steps they need. So I think they'll get through 2021, but it'll be difficult. I think the problem moving forward is the money they're going to need for development for the 2022 season. So I think everybody's just hoping that, with the vaccine and, hopefully we'll get out of this mess. But my analysis would be that they're going to be okay for 2021. They did what they needed to do last year.
Absolutely. And obviously we're hoping that the cost cap will have some kind of impact. That's coming in at $145 million and obviously lowering to 140 million next year. So I am hopeful that will have an impact. But obviously when we have things like driver salaries, marketing expensive kind of coming on outside of that, then it's difficult to know what power that really holds. But
and don't forget, it's fine. I've seen Zach Brown today on the site saying about, he believes in a driver's cap. They don't tend to tell that they want a team principals cap or a senior personnel cap, which has been mooted. So it's fine them wanting to cap the drivers, but, might have to look a bit closer to home as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think another interesting comment that we've seen recently is that from the new F1 boss, Stefano Domenicali, and he's talking a little bit about expansion. There have been some rumors that the US is a new target. Well, not a new target, but I guess they're going to put in some renewed effort to the USA and marketing Formula One there. Potentially could come with another race in Miami, which is something that's been muted for a while. What do you make of any attempts by Liberty and Formula One to kind of crack the US market finally?
They've got to. It's their home turf. If you look at the investors that have come into Formula One, both in McLaren and Williams, they're US based. Liberty are desperate to raise the profile of Formula One in the US, because to them it's the key to unlocking your Amazon coming on board, or some of your big Disney coming on board as a streaming partner. So they need to get the home market right. One race isn't enough for them. They need at least 2 races. They need to raise that profile. It's key to their whole financial plan. They've still got their eyes, their media people, their TV people, they've still got their eyes on that pot of gold. COVID's kind of detracted them, but they need to make it. They've got North America and Canada, and they've got Brazil, so they've got that part of the world that they need to get right. It's critical for them. So I think that Miami caught them out. I didn't think they, for 1 minute, thought they would have the problems they've had getting a race there. So I think that, I heard they were still going on about Miami, but they've got lots of options in the States. And the one thing we do know across there is they'll react fairly quickly. So yeah, I expect, as I say, it's no coincidence it's American investors coming on board. So I think a big emphasis, and they've had their fingers burnt. Even Vietnam was a big coup for them, and that's went sour. I think we'll expect to see at least 2 races in North America.
Excellent. And I think with the COVID situation, we have still seen, obviously we saw Dorilton Capital come forward and buy Williams. So it's not like no one is investing in Formula One. Do you expect to see new sponsors coming on board or any ownership changes this year in spite of the situation?
I'm not so sure about the sponsors. The whole sponsorship thing in Formula One is changing. It's more partnerships is the buzzword that they're coming on board. Even, Aston Martin, it's all about what Continental will do in terms of the technology. McLaren's very much down that road that, they're partnering with people that can help the team. So I think we're kind of moving away from the traditional title sponsor model, if you like. And I think we are moving, and McLaren's proven the point that it's better to have a lot of smaller sponsors. You're not relying upon one. If you add them all together, you're probably bringing in more revenue. So I expect to see more partners coming, and whether some of the global brands will join. The problem is that every company's under pressure just now. Team ownership, there's 2 definitely on the radar, Haas and Sauber. I think, Gene Haas is a hard card to play, so we'll see how the Mazepan thing all unfolds. But there's plenty of money out there. There's plenty of countries and investment funds and individuals and capital investment groups. There's plenty of money out there looking for a home. And even one thing with COVID is that we've seen the richer get richer. So I think Formula One's in a strong position. I even think Liberty Media are a target as well themselves. So I would expect some news throughout the season. I think we'll have at least one team will change ownership. I'm sure the Swiss and Longboat Finance, if the money men in the Middle East come their way, they'll take it. They'll run. They've had their stint.
And I just wondered if you could give your take on the situation we have with Stellantis. Obviously, that's kind of a merger that's been going on for a number of years now. Do you think that could influence Sauber or Haas, obviously, because they are supplied by Ferrari?
Yeah, I mean, it's a real conundrum. I mean, it's a massive undertaking to merge those two conglomerates, and the fallout and where the priority will lie. I mean, Sauber's already making noises, they're not sure about Alfa Romeo, and you've got the whole Ferrari in the mix and the whole politics and, the different stakeholders within that new group and power struggles. And it's like we all thought Renault were going to walk from the sport, myself included, and then they had a shift in emphasis to the Alpine brand, as much as Mercedes is moving as well to their performance brand. So there's a sort of shift away. So it's really within that group. There's this conundrum as well, is that there's less certainty now that Formula One encourages people to buy a car or go for a certain brand. The average Joe who doesn't watch isn't influenced. Ferrari's maybe the exception to the rule. If you're a Ferrari fan and you can afford a Ferrari, you're going to buy a Ferrari. But it's the payback for the companies it's less certain now. It used to, I think it's more nuanced than it used to be. This, win on a Sunday, sell on a Monday. That's old hat. So I think there'll be some difficult decisions made, and I can't. I've heard Formula One making noises that they're speaking to new manufacturers about coming in, but they could be speaking to them, and the conversation's been a fairly short one.
And finally, I guess this is quite a similar topic, but we've seen this new situation at Mercedes with Ineos coming on board as a shareholder. Do you see this kind of ownership model being the future of Formula One? Potentially not necessarily car companies, but different kind of companies coming in, and we move away from this kind of traditional manufacturer model?
I think so. I mean, if we look even in Formula E, some of the manufacturers dropped out there fairly quickly. They're pulling out of, a lot of the racing series are falling to the wayside because the manufacturers, car manufacturing is going through this seismic change because of electrification and the global economy and the getting rid of diesel. So it's going through huge changes, and they might well not want to be sidetracked by having to worry about their involvement in motor racing per se, not just Formula One, but across the board. So I do think there'll be a move away from motorsport from manufacturers, and that void will be filled by other companies. I mean, Ineos is a sort of a peculiar beast, and Mercedes is a good snapshot because it's now owned by a car manufacturer, an individual, and another company. And we're uncertain. We're still uncertain who Darlington's real. They're an investment vehicle. There's somebody behind that, so there's still uncertainty. So I think the ownership structure will start to change. What we don't necessarily want to see is, I think Ineos will be good for Mercedes on a whole lot of fronts in terms of their engineering expertise they can bring and their commitment to sport. I think what we want to avoid is some of the venture capitalist firms who will come in to buy a team because they think there's a quick payday down the road, because it's easier for somebody to buy a team than set up a team. That's not good. That's not good for teams. That's not good for development. They've not got the commitment. So I would hope that we'll see a shift away from the car manufacturers, but I hope it's replaced by the likes of your Ineoses of the world that have got a longer term view and want to put money into it and are actually committed to motor racing.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much for your time, Gary. It's always fascinating to get your perspective on things that are going on in the world of Formula One. And of course, everyone can read Gary's weekly column in the pit lane at grandprix247.com.
Thanks for listening, and we'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye.